Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. I've heard it said that everybody's business is nobody's business. Fortunately, when it comes to Tech Valley, this is not the case. For one thing, the Center for Economic Growth was created just to take care of everybody's business. Our guest today is David Rooney, who's Senior Vice President of Programs for the Center for Economic Growth. I want to welcome you here, David.
Thank you, Richard. Pleasure to be here.
I've read a lot of articles about CEG lately, and we can go into some of that later, but
Sure.
First I wanted to find out a little bit about what it does and how it got started.
Sure, I can give you the Reader's Digest version so we can concentrate on some other issues. But CEG, the Center for Economic Growth, a regional economic development organization, set up 20 years ago now, in 1987, by the business community to bring a business perspective to the practice of economic development, which had often been solely the purview of government. The whole notion was that companies whose economic success was predicated on the success of this region wanted to get together and help to make sure that their issues and their agendas and their concerns were addressed from an economic development standpoint. So whether you were a bank or a hospital, a newspaper, folks who couldn't up and move their business elsewhere wanted to make sure that this region was vibrant and successful so that they could be vibrant and successful as well.
That makes a lot of sense. We don't have really a regional government anyway, so in order to get a regional perspective, you almost need a bigger group, whether it's the state or...
Well, when you think about it, businesses work from the notion that their workforce and their access to market comes from all around a region, not held up by the constraints of one municipal township or a river. So the notion of thinking about what's the regional economy, how does it stretch, and what kind of geography does it cover, was a primary motivator, and I think still a critical piece for us today.
Now, economic development is a broad term.
Sure it is.
It could be almost anything. How did you focus on what objectives?
I think early on the notion was how do we look at our infrastructure as a region, whether it was the redevelopment of the Albany Airport, not far from here.
And this was 87.
This was 1987, and a lot of it was predicated again on some of our major corporations, whether it's General Electric or at that time KeyBank and the old North Star banks. Those were national companies, national organizations bringing clients and recruits and folks in from all over the country and all over the world. And their concern was, hey, in this case, our airport didn't really match where we wanted to be as a region, where we wanted to be as a business destination and location. So they focused on infrastructure issues. CEG focused early on in some of those infrastructure issues and was one of the leading forces together with Senator Bruno and the folks from Albany County and the state in creating and redeveloping the Albany County Airport.
And that was a wonderful success. I don't know anybody who travels through here that doesn't look at that airport and say, I love this airport.
Well, it's a super gateway for us as a region. If you think about it, it really does, I think, illustrate that we're a region on the rise and on the move, and it just has great amenities, and it's also a pretty easy airport to navigate from a passenger standpoint.
Right.
That helps.
Right, absolutely. Now, in terms of specific objectives, I imagine they changed a lot from 87. We've gone through recessions, we've gone through good times, bad times, but technologically things have changed quite a bit.
Oh, I think the technology certainly, and the changes in technology certainly have continued to help us refine our mission, but I don't think they've changed it tremendously. We really focus on three organizing principles for CEG. How do we grow existing companies? You know, there's an adage that says that 80% of the growth comes out of local companies when you have job growth in particular and investment growth in a given region. So the focus on growing our local companies, helping them to be successful and productive and efficient is very important to us and competitive. The second principle really is how do we attract new investment to this region? How do we get ourselves on the global radar screen, if you will, and attract new investment, new companies, new ideas to come and locate their businesses or start up their businesses here. And then the last organizing principle on kind of a three-legged stool is how do we prepare this region for growth? Growth that I would suggest to you we haven't really seen since post-World War II in the late 40s and 50s through perhaps the early 60s. Growth that really puts us in line for some different types of challenges, but different opportunities than we've seen in many years. So how do we prepare our communities for that growth, and how do we maintain and preserve our quality of life while accommodating that growth?
Well, let's look at all three. We might as well start with the first one.
Sure.
Dealing with local companies now and trying to grow them.
Yes.
What kind of things do you do to do that?
We have a whole suite of services that we bring to bear for companies. We received some funding from the state of New York as well as our members, and I should have mentioned earlier on, we have about 300 member companies as well as communities from throughout the region who support CEG. So we use some of the funds that we receive from those members as well as from state and federal sources to provide services directly to companies. If it's a manufacturer in this region who wants to be more competitive in terms of their production processes, we might help them with winnowing out some of the waste and some of the inefficient practices they have through something called lean manufacturing training that we bring to bear. We may help small startups to identify venture capital opportunities so they can get funding to go from a good new technological idea to a competitive product, a commercial product. So we try and bring some resources to bear in that manner. We use some of our members as mentors, folks who've already started companies, who've gone through some successes and some failures, and try and help bring their capabilities and their experience to bear for young technologists and young entrepreneurs so that they can hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls and trappings that have come with development of small companies. Those are the types of things and resources that we try and bring to help our local companies to be competitive and be successful globally.
I would say that's a broad palette of things that you bring.
It is a pretty broad palette, but those are the kinds of issues and areas that these companies need to address. As I said, oftentimes a company will have a great idea for a product or will be going along and have been successful for many years with their current production capabilities, but it may be time to apply new technologies, new innovative technologies to help their existing manufacturing be successful. Or it may be time to look at new markets, new venues, whether they're here in the United States or globally, that they might want to pursue. An example of that is we just took a delegation of companies from around the region as well as other economic development folks from around the region to China, to Shanghai, and we went to the semiconductor show, Semicon China. This is the first time we'd taken a regional delegation, and a small firm in Scotia called Capovani Brothers is competitive and sells into the semiconductor market. So we brought them.
What do they sell?
They sell retooled and remanufactured equipment, semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And so we helped them to gain access to the Chinese market that, as a small company with not very many people operating in Scotia, they would have had a difficult time doing on their own. So that's just one way we try and help the local companies to reach out and be productive and successful.
Now, in terms of operations, you mentioned lean manufacturing. How did that develop? It's a modern technique. It's obviously a good technique.
It's a modern technique. It came out of Toyota, and it was some of their manufacturing principles. The notion was, can it be applied to other manufacturers outside of the automotive industry? And this obviously started in the 60s and 70s, has really caught on and become very much a critical piece of global competitiveness for our local manufacturers. So we have folks on staff, consultants on staff, who are experts in lean manufacturing principles, and they conduct classes and do manufacturing sessions right on site with companies. Maybe you're a second or third shift manufacturer, so you're there at 6 in the morning, or you could be there at 6 at night doing a session for a company to help the folks on that session and that shift learn some of the principles that are important to then apply to their own companies.
Now, are most of the companies you help on the small side? I would think GE has plenty of strategists and theorists, but we have a lot of incubators and people starting out who probably have great ideas and energy, but lean manufacturing is probably not what inspired them to get into business.
That's true. Again, we have a whole range of companies and a whole range of sizes from all around this region. So some of our traditional manufacturers, folks who employ anywhere between, let's say, 20 and 200 individuals, are part of a group called the Chief Executives Network for Manufacturing, one of those networks that CEG helps to foster in the region. And the manufacturers are often ones who take advantage of those lean principles and who work with us to deliver those kinds of capabilities to their company. Now, on the other end of the spectrum are those small technology startups. As you mentioned, we have incubators at Union College, at Rensselaer Polytechnic, and through the University of Albany, as well as other incubators all around the region, 7 or 8 right now in total. And we work with those incubators to deliver some of those early stage capabilities, whether it's finding venture capital or finding an attorney who might be appropriate or looking at the types of insurance a company might need. Those are the types of resources that we can help to bring to bear for those small companies to go from good idea to commercial product.
Are there any companies out there that aren't fully aware of what you do?
I'd like to think not, but I'm sure that there are. And one of the tools that we have, and I brought some props with me today, Richard, for our discussion. One of the tools that we have is called the Technology Roadmap. This was it's an online virtual community at technologyroadmap.org that we developed about 4 or 5 years ago in conjunction with a company, Agora Studios, who was headquartered in the RPI incubator. The Technology Roadmap really is a virtual community that gives an inventory of companies operating in certain technology sectors that we believe we can be competitive with globally. Those are nanotechnology, IT, alternate energy systems, biotechnology with a focus on life sciences, and advanced materials, ceramics and polymers and silicones, all areas where this region has strengths and all areas that have global promise and opportunity to them.
Right, they're all growth areas.
They're all growth areas. We created the Technology Roadmap to get an inventory of who's operating in those industry sectors here in this region. We developed it, and then in conjunction with the Capital District Business Review, we print a hard copy version of that. And that's what I brought with me today.
Beautiful.
And that that newest version of that is going to be coming out in the next few weeks on the in the Business Review. So it'll be available for folks who purchase or who are subscribers to the Business Review.
And I noticed you've got a website for this. I
Yes.
saw that. We can put that up on the screen
Sure.
here and let people see that, and they can explore that site.
Sure.
Probably reach out to you from
Oh,
it.
absolutely. They can. What the site consists of is profiles. So a company will put up a profile. What's your key industry? What are the sales channels you have? What's the geography your company currently meets and market it currently meets? So what it really creates are ways for local companies to work together, as well as giving us a sense of how rich and robust is the types of companies and the breadth of companies we have in a given industry. It gives those local companies a chance to work together to solve some of their problems or to pursue opportunities they might have.
Now, if there is another company and they happen to watch this program or
Sure.
or know somebody who watched it and they say, do you know anything about this? How would they qualify? Would they be welcome, and how would they evaluate their situation in terms of utilizing CEG?
Well, I think they certainly can visit our site as well, Richard, which is ceg.org. They certainly can
Okay.
jump on our site and get a sense of what are the breadth of services that we provide. And then they can reach out to us directly. And we're happy, and we host a whole series of seminars and events throughout the year that calendar is available again on our site. We work in partnership with many of the regional chambers of commerce, the Albany Colony Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Saratoga Chamber, the Schenectady Chamber, the Rensselaer County Chamber, chambers from all around the region are partners of ours in many collaborative efforts. So that's another way. We work with the folks from the Small Business Administration. We have a whole host and a network of folks that we work with. So, and also a whole range of folks from the state of New York that we work with. So there are many different ways to reach out to us, and we're happy to meet with companies and discuss their situation and determine if we don't have the right resources, then certainly maybe some of those other organizations I mentioned might, and we'll work to try and find resources that can help companies to be successful.
It might be a good place right here to jump into the second thing that you do.
Sure.
Because having all these strengths locally may also make it more attractive to businesses outside of here to come in.
That's exactly right.
When they see that we're cooperating and we have a dynamic environment.
Mhm.
So what do you do to bring people from the outside?
Well, there the focus is on how do we collaborate and how do we understand the strengths that we have as a region, and then how do those strengths position us globally. So the notion of trying to attract new investment to this region, to bring new ideas and new companies and new people to the market, is something that CEG's been involved in since its beginning, but really accelerated in the last 10 years or so with a focus on the bringing of AMD, Advanced Microdynamics, to this devices to this marketplace. The whole notion of can we attract a global company in a growing industry sector to come here and locate their operations. What we needed to do first was look at our strengths, and those strengths really are a terrific and talented workforce, a very enviable quality of life, access to major markets through our transportation infrastructure, and a system of universities and research facilities that really is global in its capacity and in its capability. The General Electric Global Research Center that's over in Niskayuna is a world-class facility. The research centers at the University of Albany that have developed are absolutely world-class in terms of nanotechnology. And the research that's done at Rensselaer Polytechnic, just as examples of the capabilities we have, are also world-class. How do you build on those strengths? That's really the key piece for us.
And in a way, I mean, that's the perfect question right here. How do we build on those strengths? What do you do next?
Well, what we had to do was, again, it goes back to that collaboration piece I mentioned just a few moments ago. We had to be able to go out and talk about this region globally. So we sought out the folks from those institutions and from our institutions of higher learning and from the companies who are operating in some of those industry sectors that I mentioned earlier. We sought them out. We learned how the industries that we match well with, how do they want to be marketed to? How do they want to be talked to? And then we went out and pursued strategies that reached out and got ourselves on that global stage. The first key one was in the nanoelectronics and nanotechnology sector, where we brought together economic developers from around this region, folks from each one of the counties really within this region.
I notice you have government groups that work together.
Government groups that work together, that's right. We have a local government council that the town of Colonie is one of the members of. We work with the folks from the state of New York, Empire State Development, our partners at National Grid. So we brought together a whole host of partners to collaborate on how do we market this region globally. So we reached out to those partners. We came up with a marketing strategy and marketing initiatives. And for the last, better part of the last 10 years, we've been out talking to industry leaders about what's happening in Tech Valley. And that phrase Tech Valley was coined by the Albany Colony Regional Chamber of Commerce and some of its partners. And it's really befitting, I think, this region, and has really resonated well with global audiences.
Whoever came up with that term, I don't know the individual, but
I believe it was Wally Altus,
Really?
one of the early chamber presidents, but it certainly has been continued by his successor, Lynn Taylor, and all of our colleagues at multiple chambers from around this region coming together as part of the Tech Valley Chamber Coalition. That's a great example of this collaborative process that we have together underway in this region. And it's an example of what we have to do to be competitive, because if we're on a global stage, we're competing with the folks from Dresden, Germany, and Dublin, Ireland, and Shanghai, and Singapore, as well as Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon. So we've got to be able to compete on a global basis, and we don't have the luxury of doing it on one city or one town or one county basis. We can't be competitive just with that kind of a resource. We need to work together collaboratively.
now what can we do? Some of us are in business and some of us are not. Some of us are in government. What barriers still exist that we could work on?
Well, I think we have some work yet to do in terms of how do we prepare ourselves and collaborate better within our own local communities. We have a rich history here. It's 300 years of Dutch and French and British government vestiges that are still here. All of our local incorporated villages and towns are wonderful vestiges, but they're a challenge for us at times from a development standpoint. Many of the decisions we make on land use and planning take place at a very local level. And that's not the same as it might be in some of those other areas I just mentioned that we compete with globally.
Well, certainly not China.
Certainly not China, and certainly not even Austin, Texas. So we need to think about how do we work together? How do we gather information? How do we help give our folks at a very local level the information that can help them make the most informed decisions that are going to benefit not just the communities that they represent, but the larger regional community? Those are the kinds of things that we can continue to work on. I think we're already doing that, but we still have, certainly other opportunities where we continue to work on those kinds of issues.
Sounds wonderful. I know that local officials have to deal with different constituencies, and the more they understand all the issues, the better they are able to build a bridge between them and to help us solve problems together.
Well, that's right. And if you think about it, no single community can deliver all that a business or that a region needs to be successful, whether it's workforce or whether it's market access or whether it's just all the quality of life assets and attributes. If you think about it, we drive and live and work and recreate all over this region on a daily basis. Rarely do we just stay in one town or one county on a daily basis to live and work and recreate. So if we keep that in mind and think about the fact that decisions that are made at a very local level may well impact residents in other towns and other counties all around the region, then we can start to understand the symbiotic nature and relationship that we have as a region. And it's different than what was a horseback day's ride away as it might have been 250 years ago.
Now, what are the main components, do you think, for us of economic growth? I know you mentioned employment and jobs. That's always a big thing with everybody, and it's probably the easiest sell.
Oh, sure. But that's just one of the pieces of the equation. How do we preserve and protect the quality of life that we enjoy as residents in this region, but are also then desirable and attractive to other folks who might want to come here and look at this region as a region to either locate a business or to locate or build or grow their families. So we need to think very carefully about the kinds of growth that we want to have in a given community or within the region in total, and understand that we can mitigate some of the negative impacts of that growth if we work together. So that's one of the key components of economic development, is understanding and being very much in line with the desires and wishes of individual communities, but helping the communities understand the decisions they make have a broader impact to them. So there's job growth, there's the impact of that job growth and that economic growth in a given community, there's the impact on our transportation, on our school systems, on our infrastructure, all critical issues and decisions and discussions that we need to have.
I guess what we try to do is we'll try to find really good positives for people who see some negatives. People who are worried about traffic. We need to work on the traffic, of course.
Sure.
And is that part of the plan?
Oh, I think it has to be. And one of the things with the Center for Economic Growth is involved in now is a fiscal impact study on the impact of economic growth on this region, primarily the 4 core counties of Albany, Saratoga, Rensselaer, and Schenectady counties. We're working with a team from the Capital District Regional Planning Commission and the Capital District Transportation Committee, as well as some economists and geographers and planners from the University of Albany. The whole notion is, if we grow within this region over a 20 or 25-year period, if we grow at our current rate of growth, which is about 0.3% per year, it's growth, but it's very modest growth.
Very modest growth.
If we grow at that rate but continue to use land as we have, what will the impacts of that be on our infrastructure? Now, what if we grow at that rate but look to concentrate some of that growth in our built environments and along our existing infrastructure? What will the fiscal impacts and consequences be of that kind of growth? And then if we take it out and look at other scenarios, what if we grow at the national rate, which is about 1% per year? It's about 3 times our current growth, and that could add up to 225, 250,000 people to this area over a 25-year period. Now, that's fairly significant growth for this area. It may not be that significant for other areas of the country, but it's significant for us.
Well, we're more built out.
We're more built out. That's exactly right. So how do we look at our land use and planning issues? How do we look at our urban centers and our built environments? How do we encourage perhaps more infill construction, more adaptive reuse of buildings and brownfields? And how do we encourage other transportation modes to allow for that kind of growth to take place, and understanding what are the fiscal implications of that growth? That kind of study is underway now, Richard, and we anticipate having that study done, I would hope, by the end of this spring, so certainly sometime in June. And then we'll share that with local governments, local communities, as another information set for them to use as they're making those decisions on growth. So where's the growth going to take place? What are the potential fiscal implications of that growth? We think it's one of our responsibilities as a region to look out and make those kinds of projections so communities can have a broad set of information when they make those kinds of decisions.
And that's really important.
It's critically important for us.
We have a new economic development person in Colonie, and Denise Sheehan. I know you also have a new CEO.
Yes, we do. Michael Tucker has joined the Center for Economic Growth just recently as our president and CEO. Michael comes from being director of the Harriman campus, the state campus, which is going to be moved into more of a private sector and mixed-use campus with technology base over what we believe will happen over the next 15 or 20 years. He also has an experience in real estate development, so he's got a broad understanding of what are some of this region's strengths, what are some of the opportunities from an economic development standpoint, and how do we work and collaborate between government and business and academia and the not-for-profit and local communities so that we have development that makes sense within our community context.
Well, coming from the Harriman campus, that looks like a perfect background in terms of understanding the whole process, because that's one of our focuses is allowing us to develop this area. Isn't that right?
That's right. How do we do it, again, in ways that are not just comprehensive, but how are they ways that are collaborative and in line with what the growth is that communities want to experience? So there's a campus that has a built environment all around it. It's been the home, obviously, for many state agencies for the last 30 to 40 years. How do you bring that campus back onto the tax rolls in some cases? How do you help encourage mixed-use development there? Maybe there are housing, maybe there are office complexes and retail development. Those are the kinds of developments that we're seeing in communities all around the country. And those are the kinds of mixed-use developments that we want to, I think, take a closer look at as this region continues to grow over the next 20 or 25 years.
It's almost a microcosm of the bigger picture. We have old buildings. We don't know quite how to use them. Perhaps they should all just be torn down and something new built there, but we're not really sure.
Well, I think we need to take a look at each building and what its potential uses are, and then what are the cost implications of either adaptively reusing that building or looking at its demolition. It's one of the challenges, but really one of the great opportunities we have in our urban environments in particular, whether it's the city of Saratoga Springs or the city of Troy or Albany or Cohoes or parts of Colonie and parts of Schenectady, there are opportunities in our more built environments that we need to take a close look at. It's brownfield remediation, it's adaptive reuse of buildings. We've got wonderful architecture and wonderful streetscapes and walkability in many of our urban settings. We need to see how we can adaptively reuse those, because when we bring folks from outside of this region to this region to look at it, it's one of the things they remind us of on a daily basis is those kinds of environments aren't necessarily available in other regions of the country, let alone around the world. It actually is one of the great assets that we have as a region.
Well, that's funny because I started out thinking of it almost negative as you were describing it, because when I drive around it, it doesn't look like, I guess, what I would picture Shanghai or a newly developed area to look like. It looks a little on the old side.
But that old side is perhaps one of the things that makes it most attractive. The ability to adaptively reuse those existing and very interesting spaces, whether they're old warehouses or old department stores, is something that's very attractive that some of the technology-based companies and creative individuals and creative companies we want to encourage to grow their businesses here. Great example is the old Stanley department store in downtown Troy is under redevelopment now by the File Company for townhouses and condominiums and apartments. So that's an adaptive reuse of a place where I used to buy my Boy Scout uniform when I was a kid. And it's now going to have adaptive reuse and new life to right in downtown Troy.
And that's marvelous. We have a river that's so beautiful. We had some people on talking about the Mohawk River in Colonie recently and how we can use that better. So I guess Troy is a wonderful example if you're looking for something that needs to be developed.
We have tremendous physical assets and attributes, whether it's the confluence of the Mohawk and Hudson rivers or it's the availability of mountains and hiking trails and climbing trails and ski resorts. Those are all things that make us very attractive to not just us as residents of the region, but for companies who might want to come here. And the notion of redeveloping our waterfronts, all the way from Schenectady through Colonie along the Mohawk, and certainly from Waterford down the Hudson River, are very exciting prospects for us. And I know that Troy and the City of Rensselaer and the City of Schenectady and Albany all have development projects that really take into account and reconnect us with with our rivers.
That's super.
It's wonderful stuff.
What about initiatives for going forward? We're getting close to being out of time, so I'd like to kind of blend that with maybe a message of what you would like to see people do and what initiatives you would like people to be involved in going forward.
I think some of the key things that we have are, again, those collaboration models that we've put in place, working with the Albany Colonie Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Troy and Schenectady Chambers of Commerce in particular, working with our universities. We need to work together on what are some of our educational initiatives and what are the curriculum like now that prepare our students to be productive and successful workforce members with companies who may want to start here or may come here as successful entrepreneurs and starting up their own companies. So it's that workforce preparation piece, I think, that's very important for us as a region. Do we have curriculum in place? Are we working and connecting between our K through 12 institutions, through our community colleges and two-year technical colleges, all the way through our four-year and beyond schools? How do we create a pipeline of really talented and capable and educated workforce that wants to stay in this region to grow themselves and their families and their businesses? I think that's one of the critical initiatives that we have underway as a region. We need to pursue more strongly in the years ahead.
Let's quickly look at the workforce that we have. Do we need to bring some people in specialized areas from foreign countries?
Well, I think it's been one of the things that we've seen. We have a fair number, actually a pretty significant number of foreign students who attend our major colleges and universities from throughout the region. And that's important because it brings new vitality and new interest. Encouraging them to stay here afterwards is one of the key pieces that we have. And we work with our local companies as they do recruitment and retention efforts for our college students, not just from foreign countries, but college students who come to this region from all over the United States.
Right.
How do we give them opportunities to stay? That's very important. Obviously, the technical skills that are needed in engineering and in math and sciences are going to be important, not just for new companies who are coming here, but for our existing companies as they look to grow. But it's not just in our technical areas. We need teachers, we need educators, we need artists and creative designers, and we've got such a strength of colleges and universities in this region. Our ability to help those colleges and universities be successful and retain more of their students and connect more of their students with the regional economy is very important to us. We're already working on initiatives to do that.
Great. Now you mentioned K through 12.
That's right.
How do you see those?
Oh, I think it's one of the things that we know makes us very competitive globally. Many of the companies who come and look at this region want to look at our test scores, whether it's for 4th graders or 8th graders in math and science. They want to visit our K through 12 institutions. We have several organizations here locally are working with our K through 12 institutions. Our BOCES facilities and programs here are outstanding, and their collaborative efforts with our technical schools at 2-year colleges is outstanding. So the more we can work on curriculum issues, the more we can connect those institutions together, I think the more successful we'll be. A perfect example of it, Richard, is this Tech Valley High School that's under development right now, going to be housed at its first couple of years at the MapInfo headquarters over in Rensselaer County. That is going to put us, we think, on the global map. It's one of the first technology high schools that will take place in the Northeast United States, one of the few east of the Mississippi, and the other areas around the country that have them are some of our technology competitors in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in the Carolinas, in Texas, in Oregon, and California, all the technology competitive areas we have around the country. It's an important step for us as a region.
Well, then I think what we can do in terms of everybody is to support such initiatives, and you bring a lot of information to help us make those decisions.
I think it's very important that parents and communities become engaged not only in the decisions that are being made at a very local level in their communities about the kind of growth they want to have, but in the terms of the educational resources and the educations that are being had and being created and delivered for their own children and for the students in their communities. Very important for us.
So we'll continue to work together.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to it. I know we have an awful lot of opportunity in this region. I think opportunity unlike we've seen again in the last 50 years.
That's great. We're out of time, and I think we've covered a lot.
We have covered a lot, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for the time to have an opportunity to come and chat with you.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show, and invite you to the next show. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.